Good morning and welcome to the Breaking Through Barriers Business Scale-Up panel. My name is Lily Lamb, and I am the Senior Director of Investment Portfolio for OCE. Did you know that more than 99% of Canadian businesses are small to medium-sized? Today's panel will focus on tackling barriers and highlighting the factors for success in helping to grow small companies to medium-sized ones, and medium-sized ones to large-scale organizations. For those of you who would like to get involved in the online discussions across social media, please use the hashtag OCE Discovery. Let's start off our session by introducing the moderator for today's panel. Formerly a technology entrepreneur, our moderator founded his first 3 tech firms in Kingston, Ontario, in 1995. He has worked internationally, opening offices throughout Europe, China, Korea, Japan, and the United States. Currently the president and CEO of Venture Lab, it is my pleasure to introduce Jeremy Lauren.
Thank you, Lily. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. To all our friends on this side, I do apologize. This podium is smack dab in our way. So when we get to the Q&A part, if I may stand, we'll see how this goes. But anybody over here who wants to get engaged when we get to that part of the discussion, stand if I don't see you. I'm going to try and not ignore people on this side of the house. I actually have friends sitting over here, so but I can see everybody on this side a little bit better. So welcome, everybody, to Discovery 2018 and to our Scale-Up panel. We're going to talk today about not building a startup company, but building a scale-up company and what that's all about. And we're hoping to get lots of engagement from the audience. So if you've got questions along the way, there are microphones up here at the front. If you're unable to get to a microphone, you just raise your hand and one of the runners in the room will get the microphone to you so that you can engage and ask questions. So we're looking forward to a great session today. I'm going to introduce everybody that's sitting here to my left. So we're going to start first with our marketing and analytics whiz, Marie Chevrier, CEO and founder of Sampler. Prior to Sampler, brands had always relied on traditional product sampling strategies like direct mail and in-store demos to get their product into the hands of consumers. Now there's an integrated app-based platform to target customers with better value. Next is aerospace expert Michael Cohen. Michael's a friend of Venture Lab. We're really proud of Michael. He's been a client at our Regional Innovation Center for a number of years. Michael is the CEO of Industrial Skyworks. And Industrial Skyworks provides oil and gas, petrochemical industries, and building owners with asset inspection drone technology solutions. Next on our panelist is an expert in optimizing manufacturing systems, including safety, efficiency, predictive maintenance, and system security, Greta Kutelenko.
Hi.
Greta is the CEO and co-founder of Acerta Analytics Solutions, Inc. Next is Paul Martin, and Paul is the president and founder of APX Building and On-Site Data Solutions. APX delivers intuitive technology that helps first responders get quickly access to comprehensive building and on-site data records. Did we do that right, Paul? That doesn't sound, is that right?
Yep.
I feel good?
Yep, we digitize things. And
sorry I tripped over the words.
No, it's all good.
All right, I didn't write them.
That's okay.
Our final panelist is Eva Wong. And Eva is the co-founder and chief operating officer of Borrowwell. Eva leads a fintech company which is quickly scaling up and empowering consumers to improve their financial well-being. Borrowwell offers free credit score monitoring, personal loans, and bank partnerships. So please give a warm welcome to our panelists this morning. Okay. I might do a Craig Ferguson kind of thing and just toss all of these questions, but we'll see how it goes. I've got a few to get me started. We'll warm up the audience. We're going to do this in no particular order, so to my friends on the panel, if you feel a burning desire to answer the question, please raise your hand. Let's try and get everybody involved in the conversation, and at any point that the audience wants to get involved, please do so. So just to get us started, I'm going to just put this out to the panel to get us rolling. Everyone's afforded 24 hours in a day. As an entrepreneur in the midst of scaling up, what does your morning, daily, evening, weekend routine look like? Anybody want to jump in first?
Sure.
Okay.
Which I just realized through that that my mic's on. I find myself a little bit nervous, Jeremy. We're in very, very good company here with these companies, and it's a real pleasure to be here. I'll give a little bit of color around this because I'm sort of proud and sort of embarrassed about this. This is my second career. At 42, I quit an airline flying career to start Industrial Skyworks, and at the end of my first year. First calendar year, I went into the holidays and I decided that I would, as a motto, stop watching the drone industry and start watching YouTube. And I discovered people like Guy Kawasaki and others, and I started to find things like the top 10 mistakes entrepreneurs were making. And I discovered very, very quickly into the holidays that I was making 3 or 4 of the top 10, and they were the top 4. So I realized I didn't know anything about being an entrepreneur or early stage companies, and I decided education was the key. So I start my day every day, mostly, with almost always YouTube, and almost always some sort of business lecture. I really like Stanford. I really like, today I started with the Chicago Economic Club, and I just do about 10 or 15 minutes of something to get my mind thinking from those that are really experienced, because I'm not. How's that for a start?
That's a great start. Anybody else want to add in? What's the morning, evening?
I can go.
Okay.
So I find that my most productive time is actually early morning. So I usually get up like 5:36 and I do my to-do list. So realistically speaking, in one given day, I'll probably get 3 to 4 good tasks in, and I know that. So what I'll do is I'll typically take the 2 burning ones in the morning, and then what I'll do is go into the office and be fully present with my team, collaborating on some of the things that we're doing, sitting in meetings, and typically get nothing done on my to-do list between 9 and 5, and I'm okay with that. And I feel like accepting that was kind of a big part while I'm in the office. And then at night, I typically finish off like the 3 and 4. So I think like making sure you take the time while you're in the office to collaborate with your team is a really, really important piece of the day.
I'll build off of what Marie said, because I think making the transition from a startup to a scale up, that's sort of how...
The next generation manufacturing.
How rude.
You sound
Louder,
different.
Eva.
Yeah, I think like I also felt like I wasn't getting stuff done because I was in meetings all day. But I think as the company has grown, I realized that like a lot of my getting stuff done is actually happening in meetings, and so I had to sort of get away from the like, oh, I'm getting nothing done during the day when I'm in meetings like back to back. That actually is my work now, a lot of it, and so I think I had to sort of reframe a little bit of, it's like, just because I'm in meetings all day doesn't mean that I'm not getting work done.
Right.
That actually is work, and me sort of either providing guidance or like brainstorming with different members of the team, like that actually is work, and it's less about like actually pounding stuff out myself, which I still do. It's I think there's never a point where you're just like delegating everything, but I think I had to just like change my frame of reference to be like, just because I'm in meetings all day doesn't mean that I then have to put in like another 5 hours in the morning or in the evening because I haven't done anything.
Mm-hmm.
That balance of sort of you time versus time for your team and time for your company is obviously a challenge, and it's a common theme you're talking about. I had a question about culture. I think it's a good segue into culture. As the company scales, as it's growing, I've heard entrepreneurs talk about, you get to that place in time where you come into the office one day and you actually don't know everybody's name anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's that first time where you've reached a size and scale where things are moving so fast that you are, you could feel almost like you're losing a part of that special identity that a startup has as it progresses into becoming a scale-up company. And I'm wondering if you guys could comment on whether you worry, maybe that's not quite the right way to put it, but do you think about culture, and how do you maintain the culture and that special part of your brand identity relative to culture as your business is scaling and growing at such a rapid pace? Paul?
Yeah, I'll take that one on. I mean, just building on what we're hearing now, I mean, I do know I only sleep about 3 hours a day, so the rest is working. But building on culture, I think what we've experienced as a small company, and now that we're looking at scaling our company, is as the founder, when I can see the team taking what I thought was the beginnings of the company at the early stage, and they're taking it to the next level, they're scaling it, or they actually talk the talk that is beyond where I would have been when I was initially starting our company. That to me is the culture, and it feels amazing. So if you've got your team and it's all about scaling. I mean, you cannot personally scale yourself. You have to transfer that knowledge. You have to trust. You have to find good resources that can carry forward the ball with everybody else. To me, that's part of that culture, and there's nothing more rewarding to walk into your office and actually hear that from your team. And I've sat in meetings where I've been across from our CTO, and I mean, he makes me so proud of what we're doing, and he takes everything I would have said and brings it to a completely different level, and I think that's amazing. So that's so important to scale, and culture is absolutely part of a company, a successful company, and it creeps up on you, but you also have to create it. I mean, you have to foster it, I guess is maybe the right word.
Nice, well said. Greta, were you going to add something?
Yeah, so in our company, we do certain things also to preserve it. So we've grown from nearly 8 people to now 20 in the course of like half a year. Wow. So a few things that we needed to do is almost get traditions into the company. So whenever anybody leaves or joins, we have certain things that we do. Or every time someone's birthdays are, we kind of aggregate and have certain activities. Either we'll go out or do a board game night or something. Basically something to preserve that kind of almost like team mentality within our group. And we find I find it's been really effective in getting people to get to know each other. Because once we started scaling, I started finding that too, that all of a sudden, I don't know some of the people, I didn't even hire them, I'm traveling, so I come back and there's these new people that I need to now get to know. So having these almost not pre-planned, but almost like little traditions within the company has helped maintain that feeling like we're all a team and we're going at it together.
Nice. Anybody else want to comment?
Yeah, a few tactical things that I always say around culture. So the first one is I actually think that you need to take the pressure off yourself. So I feel like just telling yourself I need to work on culture is a really unnatural thing, and you need to just realize that. So one of the things that I did, we just recently had a meeting with the entire company, and I full on said to the company, listen guys, I'm out of the office 3 out of the 4 weeks. I'm not the person to define the culture of our company. You guys have to tell me hey, we want to do this. And you have 100%, here's my credit card, go do this thing. Or figure out what you guys like. And one of the things that we've implemented that I recommend to everybody is we have a standing 3-month term for a chief culture officer within our company. We don't have HR, we're just 16 people. So we rotate 2 people on the team, typically cross different departments, actually become the chief culture officers and decide to choose what we do that month. And that puts the pressure on somebody else and also defines this culture from the people that are actually in the office and who you really want to impact anyways, right? So I think that's a good best practice for
Excellent. What a great...
Eva,
like yes?
Too. Yeah, I think definitely some of the social activities is a part of culture, but I think culture and your company culture is obviously much broader than just traditions and social things, which I think we've come to realize are so important as you grow, because that's when people can actually get to know each other. Otherwise, people sort of feel bad going over and interrupting someone at their desk. But if there is a social time for people I feel like that's when a lot of those like team connections happen. I think we've been very careful as well to define our culture based on our values, because I think it can also be easy to slip into. Like the culture is just like ways that we're similar, and then it becomes actually a bit of an antithesis to diversity. Like we care a lot about diversity and we care a lot about culture, so how do those two things fit together? So we've been very clear that our culture is tied to our values, and we recognize that as we grow, that culture is going to change and it's going to look different depending on who joins and who adds to it, but we want to stay the same are our values. And so like the values of being high performing and humble, about acting like an owner, loving to learn, like those are the things we took some time to define when we were about, I think 16 to 20 people. And that's what we sort of think is core, but like how that manifests itself and what that means to people will look different as our company grows. So I think to us, we've been very, like the social aspect is definitely like a part of culture, but I think it's like the 95% of the time when you're not doing something sort of like fun and social, but you're working together as a team, like what does that look like as well is also like a huge part of culture. So I think it's important to define. A lot of people think of culture just as like the fun things, and it's probably the most fun part of culture to talk about. But I think it really is like, how does your team work together? How do they interact? How do we get things done? And what kind of people are we hiring in that fit into the company culture, but you still have a diverse array of experiences and backgrounds?
I probably should make a comment about culture. I'll feel self-conscious all day long. I think you have to be honest about it. You clearly, if you're at, this is a scale-up panel, so you've come from startup, and there's definitely a shift in culture in the organization when you no longer know everyone or you're not involved in every bit of hiring. I can tell you exactly when our culture shifted was the first employee that went home at 5 o'clock. And my head sort of exploded. But they do, then now the expectation that this is a real job. And so we've chosen to focus on leadership or lead by example. And if someone has an expectation of a real job, then they have an expectation of exactly what their responsibilities are. So to focus on roles and responsibilities in a culture of execution was where we've had to take our startup of we're just going to do absolutely everything, all hours of the day, get it done, to now we're hiring people with a package and compensation, and they expect to have really clearly defined jobs.
It's thank you, guys. It's interesting to hear how animated and excited all of you are when you talk about the subject of culture. I mean, obviously, you're serious business people. You're building scale-up companies. You're focused on revenue. You're focused on KPIs. But you've all talked about how getting the culture mix right is critical to the success of your business. It's a really, really fascinating subject. It doesn't often get a lot of airplay, at least I find, but it's critical to how you make a company successful. I was talking with a friend yesterday who's in a scale-up company, and they're up over 300 people now, and he was commenting to me that, you know, at 3 o'clock on Fridays, no matter which office you're in the world, the video conference phones come on, or televisions come on, and it's tools down. And that's from the CEO of the organization right through. Everybody effectively breaks bread for a couple hours on Friday afternoon, and it's about maintaining the culture of an organization as it's scaling very, very quickly. And it was really inspirational to hear how they've maintained this from, you know, kind of 20 people to up over 300, and they still find a way to take a couple of minutes on a Friday afternoon and celebrate the week's successes. And it really does speak to, you know, I guess that's why it's so inspiring to work in a scale-up company. Sticking with the theme of teams, have you guys, as you've been hiring your new teams, have you noticed skills gaps, or have the needs of the kinds of recruits you're looking for, have they changed as you've morphed from sort of early stage startup to becoming a scale-up company? And I'm wondering if you could comment for us on what that looks like to all of you. Anybody like to take a first crack at that?
Yeah, so for us, we've had to hire, so initially when we started, you hire a lot of generalists, so people who are cowboys who can go, who can hustle, who can do a variety of things. As we've been growing, we've had to find a lot more specialists, so people who focus on a certain thing, who do it really well, and make it their day-to-day work just to optimize a certain part of the business, be it their focus is just marketing or just outbound sales, something like that. So we've had to shift to getting some certain people on our team being focused on getting certain parts of the company, extremely focused and extremely like increasing the quality and the effort put into those focus areas.
Excellent.
So that has been a big transition for us from like the point where it was just, you know, me and my co-founders doing everything possible needed for the company. And it's been a difficult shift also to go through, because now I can't do that logo. I need to expect someone else to do that, you know. So that was a big change for us.
Very good. And anybody else? Paul?
Yeah, just to build on that, I think for us, our experience has been when we were initially a startup and raising money, I remember a lot of the investors making sure I was a coachable individual because they wanted to have some kind of say in where they wanted us to invest their money. And I've actually moved that into the scaling side. Is what I really like is people that we can actually coach, mentor, and grow with. So you're right, the CEOs or the founders do most of the heavy lifting at the early stage, and as you start scaling the company, you actually have to have people that can carry that voice or take it to the other level. And you need someone that is a generalist, but also someone that can be coached and is open to new ideas. And the world in technology is moving so quickly, so are our customers, and we have to respond accordingly. So we do have specialists on the technology side, no doubt about that. You need some really smart people to build mission critical software and platforms. But on the business side, you really need people that are creative, that are entrepreneurs or want to be entrepreneurs, they're coachable, and they're excited about what we do.
Excellent. Anybody else want to?
I'll take a quick crack at this. I was just asked, in fact, what my requirements were for hiring. And I don't mean this to be clever, but I believe this very strongly. I had 3 requirements. I said they have to seem intelligent, appear to have energy, and smile. And it seems to me that everyone that I've had success with has at least 2, if not 3 of those elements. Those are, I think, absolutely clear. We've had 3 bad apples in the last 3 years, and they didn't smile. I never saw that person smile. I can't overstate this.
I could spend an hour.
I can see a whole bunch of people I'd hire. I really do.
That's a really insightful point. Can you restate them, Michael? Smile was last. Appear intelligent.
Well, I said to have some. I think I said
intelligence.
Yeah,
Not
to
appear,
be intelligent, to appear to have energy, and to smile. To quite literally smile. Yeah, absolutely.
Phenomenal. I love that. Yes, sir. First question. We've got you warmed up.
I don't know if this worked. Okay. You all commented about not being able to do everything, you know, as you made the transition. How many of you have started to use outsourced services? Like, hey, we're not going to do logistics. We're going to go and get a logistics company to do it, or we're not going to do HR. We're going to go to an outsourced HR. Is that part of your growth strategies?
Did everybody catch that question? Yeah. Okay. Anybody want to?
Yeah. The word virtual, right? So I mean, as you're scaling up your company, you've only got so much resources and funds, so you do have to look at outsourcing certain, I would call them non-core needs that a company has. So you invest and you keep close to your core needs, and I think for us, we've always looked at outsourcing where it made sense. But I mean, as we continue to scale those outsourcing requirements, we're going to be bringing them into the company. So you've got to maintain that continuity as you're growing to bring that into the company at some point. You can't just give somebody your keys to your car and let them drive it. That's from a founder's perspective, you absolutely do not want that. But you do need to come to the realization that you need to go outside to get some help. Because it only makes sense, and then at some point you got to be ready to pull that back in. So I think it's a mix for us. I don't think it'll be always completely outsourced, and we've looked at like HR outsourcing hiring, for example. We've made the decision that if we have to pay an outsourcing firm, and there's a lot of headhunting companies out there, they're going to do all kinds of magical wizardry stuff. They really don't, and they take a fairly large part of your cash. And I'd rather give it to the employee than to give it to an outsourcing firm. So you're always caught with that challenge, and welcome to becoming a founder of a company, right? Those are things you got to find that balance all the time.
Any other thoughts from the panel?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to the experts versus generalists. So early on, there's no way you can have like unless it's one of your co-founders that has like finance background or something, there's no way you have a full-time CFO. Yet it's actually one of the most important things as you're starting to scale up to really figure out. So trying to give you tactical examples of things we've outsourced. So we have a fractional CFO that was really helpful, and we couldn't really afford a full-time CFO. We've always outsourced HR. We've always outsourced payroll. These are things that are just not strengths of mine. So early on, I knew that I needed support there. And then as far as outsourcing the recruitment, I actually disagree. I think it's a huge burn of your time sometimes to try and get talent. If you're looking for an engineer, for example, and it's something that you need urgently, it really can impact your product roadmap. So we've actually, for the most part, about like 75% of our engineers have been fully outsourced. There are different HR solutions out there that you don't need to actually get your typical recruiter at like 18%. There are different solutions. There's platforms that you can use that are pretty good, that you can pay a monthly licensing fee. We're even using recruitment when it comes to salespeople, because it becomes really, really difficult to find someone who has tons of experience selling directly into consumer packaged good companies and having a Rolodex. So don't be afraid to outsource if it's slowing you down. And yeah, so that's my view of it.
Michael?
I take a slightly different approach to it. I wouldn't touch anything outsourced on sales, marketing, or product, but my thinking around this is to, once you've defined what the high value within the company you want to build, then you would want to keep those things built within your house. And everything else could be outsourced.
Recruitment for sales, like recruitment of salespeople, not like your sales team. Do not like outsource your sales team.
I think I got that. But if your company's around a deep level of IP, then you would certainly want to build those in-house and maybe outsource other things. I agree with the CFO thing. That's a brilliant way. We do that as well. One day a week, and we leverage such huge talent for cents on the dollar.
One of the other things I'll add to that we especially did early on is nowadays there's like so many good software tools that let you do things. Again, payroll is an example. There's like some other things that you may not need to have to outsource the whole thing, and you may not be able to hire like a full-time person to do it. But I would say like a bunch of things that used to be really hard about running a business, like all the sort of mechanics of it, there are now like great SaaS. You pay like a couple dollars an employee a month to be able to do certain things. And so I think like that's also a great thing about starting a business in 2018. There are like lots of great other startups that have been set up to solve some of these problems.
Thank you for the question. Are there? Yes, there is. Thank you.
Hi, I have a question. So I know this is scaling up, but when you're starting out and you have a team that's working like 14, 16 hours a day sometimes, people start to butt heads. Especially if you have like a CEO and he's like, well, this is what we're doing. But I'm just wondering could you talk about strategies to sort of help diffuse or deal with those kind of challenges, particularly when people start, have different opinions, but you're in a time crunch?
I'll take that. So I'm an engineer by background. So when first our small team started, we were about 5. The head of engineering, he was running product, and him and me always did not necessarily, get on the same page. So same with our CTO. So for the first, half a year, it would be a lot of, every time I would come back from, traveling, would be a lot of really heated discussions for like hours sometimes, just to get on the same page. The way we've solved it over time was just actually more planning. So we've put in a product roadmap in place. We've put in certain project documents, certain, just descriptions broadly of what we want to achieve, and kind of help having the 3 of us put down the vision of what we want to do helped a lot of those discussions, because now we were aligned, we're on the same page, we knew exactly where we were heading. And the minute details are usually not the things that cause the friction. It's more the understanding where you're heading in like 3, 6, 10 months. And having that figured out was what solved a lot of that for us. So I'd say having that alignment and really discussing that with your team helped us. Well, at least this one example.
That's a good point, and that doesn't change. Like, ultimately, people hate being changed trajectories, right? Like, you're working so hard on something, and all of a sudden it's like, oh no, we got to do this. So if you can just plan out as well as possible, or just be very clear if there is a change in trajectory on why that's happening, and including them in the conversations. Like, sometimes your change of trajectory might be an investor telling you this thing, but if you don't properly communicate, this is their thinking, this is my take on it, and explain to them why their job is changing along the way, I think that's where the most frustrations come from.
Yeah, and just to build on that, I think, we talked about culture and we talked about team building and those kinds of things. I know that I make decisions sometimes and they may not be the most popular decisions, and I hate making those decisions because you want everybody to agree with you and, be part of it. But communication is absolutely key. I think, whether I make a decision based on inputs that I had that my CTO may not agree with, it's really important that I get my CTO's buy-in on what we're doing. And so I make sure we communicate. We talk about it. I explain how I got to where I am, whether it's right or wrong. I often will say, I really don't know the right answer, but I have to make a decision. And I'm looking for their support. So, having that culture, having people that respect what you're trying to do on behalf of the company. I'm always putting the company first. I'm never anywhere near it's not about me, it's about what's best for all of our employees and our customers and so on, and our growth. And communicating that out, I think that is so important.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, that's a great, Paul said putting the company first. I'll share what my device is. I started with this for myself to be able to control my own emotions. Every time I've bumped into a conflict, I ask of the employees two things. Tell me what you want to do, and then tell me the course of action that's best for the company. Yep. And I find almost always those are two different things.
Yeah, and one thing that I've actually had a lot of success on some of the harder decisions is, if you were me, what decision would you make, right? And you just put it back to your CFO, you put it back to your key, what would you make as a decision if you were in my place right now? And you get a lot of yeah, I agree. I mean, it's not an easy decision to make, and then you get buy-in.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for the question. There's another one here, John.
Yeah, my favorite question for startup companies is what keeps you up at night, but Paul doesn't seem to actually go to bed. So let me rephrase the question, right? So from a startup scale-up perspective, what's the one thing that you're going, ooh, this is a problem for me? And it's a diverse group, right? So I'm expecting it to be a little bit different for everybody. So,
thank you. Who wants to take that one on first? What's keeping you up at night?
Well, maybe one thought that for me has been not keeping me up at night is I really, and I'm making a conscious decision to do that, but I actually feel like early on when I was talking on these types of panels, I would often say, I'm hardworking, I'm not sleeping a lot, I was putting out this characteristic of an entrepreneur that is not actually healthy. So I would caution you whenever you feel motivated by the fact that you're not sleeping at night to think that that's not sexy at all. It's actually not scalable at all, and it's not at all the culture you want to build. So I've been telling myself not to be that person and to not portray that person when speaking in front of people who are going to embark in this crazy journey that requires a lot of sleep.
Who else? I bet everyone has a thought on this question.
I mean, I'd love to say cash flow. I mean, you need to have cash in the bank to pay your employees, but that I think keeps any founder, any CEO up at night all the time. But I think really for me is to constantly move the ball forward. I mean, if you did something successful yesterday and something not as successful, if you constantly build every day, then I mean, that's how you will get to a scalable or a successful company, I think. And that's what keeps me up at night. What did we do this week, the Friday afternoon? What did we do as a company that needs to be rewarded, and we learn and we can build from there? And as the leader, you always need to find what are the good things that have happened. What did we learn? What are the things that we can continue to evolve? And it's just brick by brick, you're building your company, right? And that's what keeps me up at night. What's that one thing that we did that now allows us to keep going? And you know, you like to think you're strategic, you'd like to think you're hardworking, unhealthy, I get it. Everybody in our place would know that, but I think it's just to maintain that momentum forward. You know, the arrow or the trajectory is going up. It's not doing this.
To build up on that, I think very similar thing that keeps me up at night is it's the idea that our company is getting comfortable, that we're not iterating, not learning enough, that we think that things will work out the way they're going, and we're not considering alternatives or not, you know, thinking enough steps ahead. And that idea that, you know, we're kind of just doing things because they've been done this way, that keeps me up at night. So every time that I ever notice the trend that, you know, we seem to be, you know, not considering scaling and starting to see, you know, scaling issues, it's this idea, okay, let's sit down and completely revamp how we're doing things and completely reconsider whether this is the best approach or we need to shift to a better approach now that we're in a different stage of the company's life.
Eva?
Yeah, I think mine come back to people. And as we scale, again, it's one of those things where it's like, do all the people have the right information they need to get the job done that they need to do? Do people know what it is they're supposed to be working on? That I'm not so concerned about, but I think it always comes back to people. It's like that we've had a couple of like personal situations in people's personal lives, which you know impacts people at work. And so I think for me, it all comes back to like the right people in the right seats with the right motivation, the right information. And again, as we scale, I think we're in this conundrum of it's so easy when you all sit around the same table for everyone to have perfect information. As you grow, it's like people don't have that unless they're in meetings with each other all day long, which like is not healthy either. So it's that like balance between you want everyone to know as much as they can, but it's not possible. No, not everyone can know everything that everyone else is doing. So like what information people need in order to get the job done and still have time to do their jobs. So I think for me, it all comes down to like people, information, sort of like how that all interacts together and how we're all, again, like I think what Greta was saying, like moving forward and challenging and
right. Thank you, Eva. Sorry, Michael, parting thought?
Yeah, sure. I guess I have the the classic 2 a.m. I really don't know what I'm doing sort of thing. But I couldn't agree more on health. Someone told me very early on in my business career, if you want to do this, you have to feel good. So I immediately started putting the cell phone in the closet when I go to bed. I hit the wrapper at 10:30. A solid night's sleep. If you're going to lead a team to do great things, you need energy and pace. And the only way to do that is to feel good. I live by 2 rules. I do absolutely nothing challenging in the morning before 9 o'clock. I'll do fluff sort of stuff, and nothing late at night.
That's very good. Here's a good takeaway. Yes, please. Is it a question? Come right up tight to that microphone so everyone can hear you.
Gonna have to lower it a little
There
bit.
you go. Good for you.
So sort of speaking to the culture stuff that you guys are talking about and directly to the health piece that you guys have just been speaking about. So I started a health food company a couple years ago and very quickly realized that I'm working all hours of the day to try and get things done. I started it myself by producing the product myself, and then as we grew and the demand grew, I started hiring other people to produce it alongside me. And it's only been about the last 6 months where I've actually stepped away from production so that I can do sales and come to events like this and that kind of thing. But how do you manage that culture piece of, you know, my production team is still in our kitchen at 5 p.m. and at 4, I kind of want to sort of walk out the door and be able to go to the gym and kind of take care of my own physical well-being as well as my mental well-being. But I feel guilty about sort of leaving them to do the production, and I worry about the culture and what sort of message that sends as well when I'm walking out the door before them.
Excellent question. So for anyone who might not have heard it in the audience, I'll try and frame it this way. That's okay. It's this concept of a distributed workforce, right? And when people are in different places, as a company is chaotic and scaling and growing, how do you maintain this sense of culture and identity? Is that kind of the heart of it? Okay.
Well, one thing you said was the word guilt, which is the most common emotion felt by startup founders, I think. No study behind it, but from my friends I've been talking to. And that's a really important piece of what you're saying. and you need to figure out how you're going to deal with that, and that's something personal. So personally, I feel guilt every day, all the time. Every time I'm out and I'm not in the office, I feel it, and I'm out a lot. So what I do is I make sure that the team is clear on what I'm doing too, right? And that's like, and what I'm doing oftentimes has to do with priorities that might be further down the pipe, and will come to their desk very soon, or it might be for other things. I might be out there highlighting things that they're doing amazing, right? So it's all about being clear about all the, like, telling them what you're doing, and like wanting to know what they're doing, but forget that word guilt. It'll be really bad for you.
That's a great point. So it's kind of transparency, right? Yeah. Your team needs to know what you're up to. Anybody else like to comment on this question?
I think it's important to like define what the culture is, and I think to exemplify the culture. So if the culture is that like you do have to be there between like 9 and 5, then like you should be there 9 to 5. If the culture is not that you need to be there between 9 and 5, and I think we try to say like, look, we trust people, we hire adults, we trust people to manage their own time. We recognize you may have personal things to do during the day. We also recognize a lot of people work in the evenings, and we don't want to prescribe when people work and when people don't work. And so I think we do try to model that. Like, we do ask me anything that people can submit anonymous questions. We actually have one this morning that unfortunately I'm missing. But one of them was like, am I really not being judged for coming in after 9 a.m.? Like, is that really true that it doesn't matter like what time I come in and what time I leave? And it's like, as long as you're getting your work done, it doesn't matter. Like, I often come in after 9. We have someone who has a young daughter. She always leaves by 5:30. It's like, we hope people aren't judging us, but like, again, that's the culture we have, is we know people will get their work done, and it doesn't matter when you do it. We don't want to be a FaceTime culture. That being said, we say like we collaborate quite a bit in the office, and so we haven't really like defined quote unquote like core hours. We do expect people to be there. We don't really have like a work from home kind of policy, but again, I think like our culture is, you get your work done. We know you might have to like duck out for appointments or other things during the day, and that's totally fine.
Thank you. Anybody else comment on this? Greta?
Yeah, for us, I'd say it has to be a lot of communication about also that the work comes first, and it's less about the hours. One good example was similar. My co-founders and I, we wouldn't go to the gym, I think, until everybody would leave for a really long time, just so that we are there whenever they are there. Which then became very unhealthy for us, because then we wouldn't often start our own work until like 5, and then only at 9 were we able to really do anything outside of work hours. So having that idea that people work just as long as they need to work, really, to get their stuff done, that there's no concrete hours. And now as we're growing, everybody's coming, leaving at their own time. And we're also, another thing we have is we're international business, so in a few times, some of our salespeople need to start either at 6 a.m. or alternatively at 9 p.m. Right. So having that idea that everybody has to work same hours kind of broke down very quickly. So I think that kind of also helped bring everybody into this mental idea that you work when you need to, just to get stuff done.
Excellent. Any other thoughts?
Perhaps also just a random thought again. Perhaps put something in place that makes sure that you, when you're not there, can notice the hard work they're doing. So I don't know, production, I don't have any like experience in, but I'm sure there's like a quota or something, right? So how could they report on that like often, so that they could see you're noticing even if you're not there, and that's rewarding for them.
I'm not quite sure what stage you're at, but I would not fear a culture that says, here's a revenue milestone, here's the first customer, here's when we're shipping, and that's your culture. And if you got to go to the gym to figure out how to do those things, well, you got to go to the gym to figure out. But that's a culture. We're going to get to revenue. I mean, that's it.
Yeah, I was gonna add the word leadership. I mean, when you start a company, or if you're leading a company, I mean, your employees are expecting you to be at some level, and it's unfortunate, but yeah, you do have to sacrifice. And when you have investors or a board that says you are ultimately responsible for the decisions that you're making, or the team, that is what we sign up for. And it's unfortunate for us, for founders or for leaders, but that's what we signed up for. And I think it's up to us to find, we either become weekend warriors because we got to put everything on Saturday and Sunday because we know our employees aren't there, or we've got to find, late in the day or early in the morning to do what we need to do personally for ourselves to keep ourselves fit and healthy. But I think you're signing up for that. You've got to be there, and you know, I've been on the other side where I do leave at certain times because that's my contract and I'm an employee. When you're a founder or if you're leading a company, you're signing up for that.
One thought I give you, and it riffs on what the panel was talking about today, there's something that's well understood in the US, some of you might have heard about this, called ROE, and it stands for Results Only Work Environment. And there actually isn't legislation in Canada to really support how you implement this. However, you can still implement many of the best practices, and what our panelists are talking about today speaks very well to this concept of ROE, because I think the mistake we often make is we assume that everybody works the same way. So if my cadence is to leave at 5 and yours isn't, which one is right? And the answer is they're both right. And if you've got this concept that's built around alignment of your organization, so there's the route march, and every 30 days we check in on it, that's really the philosophy behind this ROE concept. So it's built on revenue targets, KPIs, but it's the idea of let's line up in the starting gates together. We understand in a scale up that there's going to be lots of pivots, but if there is one, we huddle, we agree to the pivot, and we continue on. And at the end of the 30 days, we evaluate only on that. And then that gives people the freedom to be able to work creatively to whatever base point suits them best. So I would encourage you to look it up. There's lots of really good reading out there about ROE, and it's rampant in scale-up companies throughout the United States and also in Europe. We're a little slow to the game here, but you can still do it. Any other questions? Oh, sorry. Yes, sir.
Hi. I'm just hoping that maybe the panelists can talk a little bit about funding. So where they've received their funding to this stage, and where they sort of expect to get their funding as they grow.
Okay, we're going to shift from culture to shameless capitalism. You're all running scale-ups. How have you received funding?
I can speak on behalf of all of us. Don't go near venture capitalists. Stay away from them. Don't ask anyone for money whatsoever. I'll hand it back.
Who would like to jump off? Marie, you want to let everyone go at this one? Sure. This is an important one.
Yeah, so Samplers raised $3.3 million to date, which is considered seed. We're currently raising Series A. It has been quite the journey, I will say. We've raised most of our capital here in Canada, so I'm excited about that. Yeah, OC was part of our first few checks for sure. We have BDC, EDC, Mars IAF, so really great investors. A lot of great, amazing angel groups here. So we've tapped into the York Angel Group, the Waterloo Alumni Angels, the Peterborough Angels, Maple Leafs Angels, and just other angels. So there's a lot of angel groups. I say that's a really, really good place to start. If you have a business that's doing good and you want to be connected with them, please reach out. I'm happy to see if you're at the right stage. So I'd say on that front, there like the seed stage is like a lot of hustle. I feel like at Series A, I feel like you know when you're ready, and I feel like we know we're ready. So the process has been a bit less hard because we feel like we're ready. But having said that, I thought I was ready like 14 times before. So so make sure you're ready.
Excellent.
Yeah, we're a very similar story. So we raised a seed round, and my previous comment was around perhaps some bitterness. I think we're at a term sheet today on the Series A. I guess what I would say is if you're going to do this, there's a ton of material on how to do it. And so dive really well into that and don't reinvent the wheel. There are fundable companies, so you've got to ask yourself, first of all, you're fundable, and then how to get funding is really, really well defined in terms of the pitch, in terms of the product presentation, in terms of financial package, those sorts of things. The best thing we could do was get really close to people that have gone through it and take a ton of counsel on how to do this. I don't think we could have done it on our own. It was a complete mystery, an entirely different language. I had no idea before I started the company.
Excellent.
For us, we raised our seed in summer of 2017, a bit over 2 million VC backed. So our lead investor was Olmers Ventures, so primarily Canadian capital with some US investors. It was the first time raising, so that was quite a challenge. Definitely agree, a ton of mentors, ton of conversations first. Like I was under impression, we'll take a few months to raise, and it took like about half a year just with new founders. We've never run a business before, so it was a very challenging activity, so don't underestimate it. But we needed a lot of help from, going to VCs and angels and practicing, understanding, how to formulate our business in a way that it is venture backable, because it's very easy to run, well, not easy, but I mean, you can run a small to medium-sized business, and that's not necessarily a business that requires venture capital, versus if you're positioning it for venture growth, you need to really think about these scale-up ideas rather than, operations, just operations or enough, revenue to support yourself. You have to think about that growth. So that was a big difficulty for us to overcome.
Paul?
Yeah, I mean, my experience so far, and we're raising money now, so if there's anybody out there, come and talk to me. But the thing that I can probably, the best analogy I can give based on my experience, is kind of like if you're in real estate, and I'm not, but if you were trying to sell a house, you're going to have 100 people walk through your house, and only one person is what you need to buy, right? And I'm always looking for, smart money. You're looking for people that relate to what you're trying to do and build as a business. So founder-friendly investors, whether it's a VC or an angel group, or people that understand the journey that you're on, or the commitment you put forward, and the strength of the business model, or the strength of the team. It's really hard to find that one that will go. But the good news is when you do, in comes the cavalry behind them. So you really need to convince one person that totally understands and gets what you're trying to do. And there's some wonderful government programs to help stimulate this, which we've taken advantage of. But it's that one leader that you're looking for that is willing to say, I'll do a due diligence, I'll bring in my experience, I'll bring in the other investors alongside with me. And investors are like that. Where's the next, the FOMO, where the fear of missing out is, where's the next whatever, and where do I put my money, right? And some investors they understand it, or they want to understand it, and then some will just follow, and there's nothing wrong with either one of those because they might be experts in another area.
Thank you.
You're looking for that one person.
One lead.
Individual.
Eva?
Yeah, I agree 100% with Paul. I think there's like a difference that I didn't understand before, but like investors are willing to lead, and investors will like jump in and fill it around. You need someone to lead it. It's not helpful if you have like all these people who are willing to give you money, but no one wants to lead it and price it. So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing that's slightly different about us, we had a couple of non-angel, non-VC investors as well. So there's definitely like a wide universe of people who are willing to fund. We had a strategic investor in our seed round, which was really helpful. So it was a company called Equitable Bank. They're Canada's like 9th largest bank, so they're not one of the sort of the big 5, big 6. But that was like really great, and really, again, smart money, really helped us with our model and built a ton of credibility, and then brought along others as well. The fact that we had a bank that was willing to fund us was super helpful. And then another one of our investors is Portage, which is the corporate VC of Power Financial. So I think that's also another route that you can go beyond sort of like traditional angels and VCs.
Thank you. Just a quick survey before we get to your question, sir. Who in the audience is raising capital right now? Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. And that's good. Okay.
I wanted to ask about investor relations, so maybe a bit in the same vein. How did your IR change, or how does it change when you move from startup to scale up? And what, if anything, would your current scale-up self tell your past startup self to put in place for IR?
What's IR?
Investor relations.
Oh.
Yeah.
I didn't
So
know
the
that
question,
either.
sorry, the question was, how has the investor relations strategy changed from startup to scale up?
Or the requirements, like how does it change when you make that shift? And what would you tell your former self to put in place back when you were a startup to make that transition easier, or to excel at it as a scale-up?
Yeah.
Got it. Great question. Thank you. Thank you.
Great question.
Okay, who wants to tackle that one?
I'm happy to jump in. I think at the beginning, when people are writing smaller checks, they don't care as much because you don't have as much of their money. As people are writing bigger and bigger checks, they do care more what you're doing, what the metrics are. And I think like our business doesn't have the sort of like standard SaaS model of like recurring revenue from the same customer of the same amount. So getting all those metrics in place has been has been a big part of our sort of investor relations. We put together a monthly reporting package for all investors, and the bigger investors at least. And it's like defining what all those are, making sure it's automated. So there's a few things I think we had in place that we're like able to pull together. But I'd say like early on, just like think through like what are the key metrics that you care about and how are you reporting those in a way that's like fairly automated, so it's a bit less painful for you to like pull together the information you need for a package.
To my colleagues, we're at the final minute mark, so you've got to be quick with your comments.
Well, what I was going to say is at first we definitely reported like quarterly, and we actually still do, but we definitely focus more on kind of highlights like sales, marketing, like operations highlights, and then financial. But to Eva's point, we had to figure out what our metrics are. We're also not a typical MRR business. Don't get stuck in that, because your business will look like it's doing a lot less good than it actually is. So define what your operational metrics are. For us, it's samples moved and things like that that are not conventional. So define what that is and report on that.
I would say capital is regional. So if you're starting and doing business in this ecosystem, look at what the funds are funding in this ecosystem, what their products look like, what sort of verticals they're working in, and pay attention to try and structure your early days towards success with local funds.
Yeah, I would just say put your bricks in place at the early stage. If you're don't delay your investor relations. Start doing it early, and then you're going to get better at communicating with your investors. But you're also building from something that metrics you put in, and those that work you will know. So we learned do it early, and continue the momentum as you get bigger and bigger.
And make sure the same metrics you show your investors are the ones you show your team, right? So that everybody's aligned.
Transparency. Greta, any parting thoughts just quickly, or is that?
Yeah, sure. The one advice someone gave me is it's about, form many dots to make a line. So the more to interpret, the more investors hear from you, the more they know how you're making progress, and the more they see it as progress. So establish a cadence of updating them constantly about your progress.
The five of you have given an inspired conversation today. You truly have. You're having fun, right? This is your life's work. You care about this stuff. You're passionate about it. I want to thank you all, and I want to thank the audience for participating with questions today. That makes this a lot more fun. I thought it was a really great hour. It flew by for me. So I want to just say thank you to my colleagues and my panelists, and we'll turn it back to Lily.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'll reiterate Jeremy's thank you to the panel. We know that these issues are top of mind for companies that are initiating their own startups. We really appreciate everyone joining us for this discussion. And thanks to our moderator, Jeremy, who obviously did a fantastic job.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.